a proxy attending on his behalf, Dr. James Salt,
Present.
James Sherrard,
Present.
Karen Holland, Dr. Michelle Ratcliffe, Dr. Tana Connell, Lisa Minatola,
Present.
John Stevenson,
Present.
James Diana, Chief Deputy AG Alex Mackler,
Present.
Dr. Julius Mullen, Captain Fahim Akil, Representative Sharia Moore. Mr. Chair, we do not have a quorum at this time.
Without having a quorum, we again cannot accept our meeting minutes from our previous minutes. I'm not sure if our guests have joined us, but just a little to speak, if they haven't, about Captain Cummins and GVI. They will give the overview, but Captain Cummins, Chief Bobby Cummins, was a former chief in Wilmington. I've known Captain Cummins for many years. He was actually my community officer when I was on city council. So he and I have had a long-standing relationship and have had many conversations regarding community engagement and community policing and what it really takes to implement change, not just from the officer standpoint, but from the community standpoint. So I am thrilled that Captain Cummins is leading our state's GVI group violence initiative and look forward to their presentation. Over this past weekend, in another note, my twin brother and I, as the state poet laureates, we hosted a poetry festival this weekend entitled Right Now, where we work with students from throughout our state, and in particular here in Dover, the Sankofa group, and many middle schools and charter schools within the city of Wilmington. And our themes were group violence and community violence, gun violence, and how has it impacted the lives of our youth, and to hear their messages of hope and inspiration were just so telling and really gripping. And to think that the impact that gun violence has had on their lives, I mean, every day they sense it. I mean, some of the poems just truly resonated with me in the sense of the way in which their lives are forever changed by the violence and the threat of violence within their communities. The Friday night before our festival this past Saturday, there was a double homicide in my district. And then we had the festival, and then an hour after the festival, there was another murder in my district. So this issue and the need has truly continued to be very just telling. Our work is so important, and our efforts are needed now more than ever. So I continually just thank the members of our subcommittee for their involvement and their willingness to help us bring forth some recommendations that will assist our overall African American task force with presenting a plan for not only local but statewide interventions that address gun violence and community violence.
Mr. Chair, we're still not joined by our guest speaker.
Do we know if Captain Cummins and the GVI group has joined us?
They have not as of this moment. Staff is currently reaching out to Mr. Cummings' assistant.
Good morning again. Sorry about that. I was making sure that you were able to hear me because I can't hear myself, and it was a little just distracting. We are waiting for our guests. They have logged on, so we're waiting for them to come forward with the presentation.
I can hear you. Well, can you hear me? Now I can't hear you.
DTI, is it possible to assist Mr. or Chair Chicocha with his tech issues? Thank you.
Everyone, I apologize for, I wasn't hearing myself, so I couldn't tell if you were hearing me or not, because I couldn't hear anything. And I'm not sure about what was happening inside of the headphones, but I am back, and I'm greatly appreciative. I do see that GVI has joined us, and I look forward to their presentation this morning. I will ask that Chief Cummings, if you are ready to present for the GVI initiative, we welcome your presentation, sir. Good morning.
Good morning. He's still joining. Let me follow up with him to make sure he's not having connection issues.
Thank you. And while we're waiting for Captain Cummings in the GVI presentation, I'll just move a little further down the agenda. Toward the end, there was going to be a discussion about work groups. And I sent out an email to a few of our members asking if they would assist us in trying to develop our recommendations by creating smaller work groups so that we could begin focusing and highlighting on certain areas. Those areas were firearms, mental health, justice, prevention, and intervention. So what I will begin, everyone, all of the members of the subcommittee will receive an email, but for us to begin thinking about where you would like to focus your efforts, because we will ask for each subcommittee member to join one of those subgroups. And again, they are firearms, and was really, I spoke to my police chief and sent a note to the Dover Police Chief Johnson, as well as Captain Nikhil, about assisting in that effort, about looking at the illegal firearms and having a concentrated focus on ways in which we could try to address illegal firearms, and also illegal firearm possession, and looking at what we can do from that perspective. So looking forward to that initiative. Dr. Julius Mullen has offered to help lead the mental health component. for recommendations from this subcommittee. For the justice, we have Ms. Minatola and Deputy Mackler will assist us in that. And then Mr. Gilmore Crosby will lead the subgroup on prevention and intervention. So again, all of the group members will receive an email outlining those groups and hopefully have be willing to participate in one of those to let their efforts be more concentrated as we begin to work toward our development of resolution or of recommendations from this body toward the Fall African American Task Force. I do see Chief Cummings with us. So again, sir, welcome to the African American Task Force Safety and Justice Subcommittee. We welcome your presentation on GVI. This group has been established to come up with recommendations regarding the gun violence and other community violence and justice issues impacting African American communities statewide. And we know that GVI is a longstanding proven method and approach that has been implemented in many areas. We're glad to have it here in our city, and we are welcome the opportunity to learn more about its implementation and how it can be a part, hopefully, of our recommendation and of the strategies that we will see that help assist us in reducing the gun violence within our city and state. So Chief Cummings, thank you and welcome, sir.
Thank you, State Rep. So we'll go through a little presentation about GVI, what we've done as far as the implementation goes, the staff that we have to support GVI. So we'll go through a little slide presentation.
Will you allow us access to screen share, please?
Okay, you should have the ability to share.
I have it now, thank you.
All right, so GVI is a group violence intervention. It's a strategy through John Jay College that we're participating in. Again, it deals with individuals who are involved in group violence. Obviously, we know the city had some issues around violence that was occurring. They did a problem analysis and found out that it was about 34 different groups in the city that was identified, which had about 800 and some odd members in these particular groups. So you have a city of 72,000 people, and everybody wants to think that everybody in the city is involved in violent activity. But what you find is that there are a small percentage of individuals who are actually engaged in the violence that you need to focus on trying to make a difference in their lives so that they no longer engage in a group violence, and that we're in a prevention or preventative state and not we're intervention, not prevention. So things have already occurred most times by the time we get involved in it. But as we do our intervention, it can turn into some prevention. So the history, again, there were a lot of ER visits. There were things around trauma. There were juveniles. The juvenile justice system was involved in this. We have school disciplinary and truancy issues that were going on. And they took a look at that, how we came up with this how we got involved in this strategy. And the CDC report had mentioned a lot of these things as a lot of the issues that were impacting what was going on. So from that CDC report, again, the problem analysis was done, and that's where we are today. So we go forward. And what the CDC report basically did not say is that a lot of this stuff was involved around group violence. It was group driven. And again, that there was a small percentage of 1.5% of the individuals that engaged in gun violence, that they were seen to be either they were going to be a victim of a shooting or they were going to be your shooter. So what we do is we engage those individuals through the strategy. And what the strategy looks to do is reduce the dynamics through peer pressure and creating a collective accountability for the group that is involved. We try to foster some internal social pressures that will impact how these groups respond. We establish a clear message that the people in the city will no longer tolerate the violence. The community is tired of the violence. So we want to give you an honorable way out of this lifestyle that involves group activity. And then we give you a pathway through social services that hopefully, if you take advantage of it, because it's a voluntary system, that once you get engaged, we look at the barriers, we look at the things that prevent you from moving forward and try to provide those to you as we have access to state services and also other community services that we can help get them on the right path. And then some of the core principles, number one is we want to do no harm to the individuals. They're already in a situation where there's a lot of trauma and things that they have gone through. So we want to strengthen the community capacity to help prevent some of this violence. We want to enhance the police legitimacy by creating an environment where they understand that the police don't just want to arrest them, but they will if they have to, but they also want to see them safe, alive, and out of prison. And we try to get deterrence right as part of building the police legitimacy. And we, again, like I said, we offer supportive services through the services that we have access through the state. And then in this whole strategy, we want to use law enforcement as less as possible, but it is a critical part of the strategy, but we try to make that not the forefront of what's going on within GBI. So how we get this message out? We do things, we engage the community members. And through this, we have moral voices. We have someone who will speak to the voice of pain, someone who will speak to redemption, someone who will speak to an aspirational piece. We have our social services component where we advise them of the types of services that we can provide that will help them move forward. And law enforcement gives them a message, again, basically indicating that, you know, we know who you are, but we want to help you. We want to get you on a pathway that where you will have the least amount of law enforcement interactions as possible, because we want to see you safe, alive, and out of prison. And how we deliver these messages. We have what's called a call-in, and a lot of people think of it as a telephone call, but it's actually a in-person meeting that we have with the different groups that we have within the city of Wilmington. We try to select the ones that are most engaged in the violence at the time. And we invite members of those specific groups to, again, the call-in, where it's, again, a face-to-face meeting where they're provided with the messaging that violence is not acceptable, that law enforcement gives a message to them, again, indicating we know who you are. So you get the U.S. Attorney General's office, the state AG's office, the Wilmington Police Department, who will provide a message to them. You get the social services component that will provide a message, and you get the community voices that will provide a message. And again, and the call-in is not a conversation. It's not a two-way conversation. It's an opportunity for us to provide a message to them that they can then take back to members that they associate with and members within their group to spread the word about what GBI is all about. We also do custom notifications, and custom notifications are where we go out to specific individuals and we give them the same type of messaging, but it's not in that formal format. But we do provide them with the opportunity for services. We let them know the information about law enforcement, and that there are people in the community that would like for them to be safe, alive, and out of prison. So then we do in-reach. In-reach is where individuals are either in custody, they're on probation and/or parole. And again, we provide them with this same messaging. So December of 19, we did the first call-in, and then obviously we were then impacted by COVID in 20. So we had to go to more custom notifications than actual call-ins, and we were able to still engage individuals and get them to voluntarily engage with us to allow us to provide services to them that would be instrumental in changing their lives. And again, I mentioned in-reach a little bit, where individuals are, again, either incarcerated or on probation and parole, and we have the same conversation with them. And one of the things that we also did as we started this particular strategy, it was mainly geared for adults. And in July, we started doing juveniles because we saw that there was a lot more engagement from juveniles in the violence. So when we started addressing the juveniles, we had to get the parents involved because we didn't want to talk to and knew we couldn't legally talk to juvenile individuals without having the consent from family members. And when we addressed the juveniles, that you could not just address the juvenile without addressing the family, because there are social issues around that would allow us to engage family members as well as the individual. So we don't just look at the individual, but we look at the family structure and see if we can make impacts or inroads there. Chris. Okay.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Chris Kressler, and I am the Deputy Director of Operations for GVI. So I'm just going to go over a little bit of information here with you just about the partnership implementation. So this was, more than a year in the making in bringing together all of these groups to address this problem of violence in the city. So there you see there's a list of the law enforcement partners that we work with, as Bobby mentioned, WPD, DOC, and recently added last summer, Department of Services for Children, Youth, and Families, DOJ, United States Attorney, and all the federal alphabet soup that works in law enforcement. And then on the social services side, which is our focus, obviously the State Department of Health and Social Services, DOE, Services for Children and Youth and their Families. And you see they're on both sides, both lists, because they serve multiple roles in the community. Excuse me. They have a law enforcement role, but they also are the umbrella for PDH and provide mental health services for children and families that need those. There's the Department of Labor, Housing Authority, and then of course we keep mentioning the community at large, and it is so important that we have that support and that participation from our civic and community associations, local businesses, and influential leaders. We've made some great connections already within the community that have resulted in jobs, kind of informal or formal mentoring opportunities for some of our participants. So we just want to see that grow as our program continues to grow. In terms of the state infrastructure, we are really trying hard to make this an institutionalized program that's offered indefinitely in the state of Delaware. And the Department of Health and Social Services is currently supporting the staff you see listed there from, Bobby's position. Myself, John Cook is our Deputy Director of Support and Outreach. And then we have a program manager, a community engagement strategist, and then a handful of case managers and youth life coaches. And, we definitely have planned additional expansion in 2021, both to handle our existing caseloads here in Wilmington. And there has been a spark of interest in us expanding down to Dover as well to address some of the issues they're experiencing there right now. DSCYF has also dedicated resources to this initiative, as has DOC, where they established a new unit specifically to supervise folks that are participating in GVI that are at the highest risk of shooting or becoming the victim of a shooting. So they have added a supervisor and 5 additional officers as well. This is just kind of an overall snapshot of the organizational structure of GVI. It really is a collaborative model. You see up at the top there, the governor's office and DOC, DOL, again, all the alphabet soup agencies we've been talking about that are part of his Family Service Cabinet Council are up there at the top, as well as the Executive Committee, which has oversight for the initiative. And that includes the governor's office, again, WPD, DOJ, Health and Social Services, all of the participating agencies. And then you've got Bobby in the middle there, and he, supervises then the support and outreach team that you see at the bottom of this grid. I think it's important to recognize too that, we are receiving consultation from the National Network for Safe Communities out of John Jay College. They have sites all across the United States that are using this GVI model. And they had predicted for us that we would see a 10 to 20% rate of engagement in our social service offerings from the total population outreach. We are well above the national standard here in Wilmington, and we're really proud of that. We currently have an engagement rate of 63%, which means, we have a lot of adults and juveniles and their families that have said to us, yes, we want help. Yes, we want out of this lifestyle. Yes, we will work with you to try to make changes necessary in our life to avoid future involvement with the justice system. So if you look at this, this is just some data from our inception to date. Again, as Bobby mentioned, we started with adults in August of 2019. We added juveniles to the mix in July of 2020. So the data on this slide shows where we are through the end of February of 2021. As of that time, we had made 79 offers of support through either call-ins or custom notifications. 77% of folks actually accepted some level of service from us. And then 63% of those fully engaged with our intensive case management services. So basically that means, that they're meeting with us regularly. They have established goals. They are, actually, regularly making progress on a significant change in their lives. And then lastly, I think it's important to mention that we do have a no exit policy. So individuals and or families can request services anytime beyond the initial contract. So whether we see them first at a custom notification or at a call-in, they can say no because the program is 100% voluntary. But we periodically check in with everyone who tells us no, regardless, hey, has anything changed? Are you doing okay? We're still here if you need us, if you want services. And that no exit policy has proven to be very beneficial. We have a number of clients now that over a year ago told us no, and then have come back since and said, you know what, I've been thinking about this. I've been seeing the impact in the lives of some of my friends. I really would like to work with you guys now. And we absolutely take them in with open arms. So that is critical. There's nothing a person can do to be kicked out. So even those that make mistakes, while they're working with us, we know that change is a journey. It's often 3 steps forward, 1 step back. So if they do make a poor decision and they end up reincarcerated or rearrested, we do continue to provide emotional support to them and their family. If they are incarcerated, we'll do routine visits with them. And our hope is that while they are incarcerated, they will continue to engage with us and continue to work on personal change, and that when they are released back to the community, they're really ready for that fresh start. So far, 66% of those we have touched have been adults and 34% are youth. I think it's really interesting to show you the statistics too on the engagement rate divided by age. So 58% of those adults who have accepted services became fully engaged in that intensive case management component I mentioned. However, 74% of the youth and families have become fully engaged. And so we think that's a really interesting statistic because we have learned through this experience that it is the entire family. And when we service them holistically, that, can be very, very beneficial to have a parent or a legal guardian that's really on board with getting whatever help and services are available to that young person so that they can, make better choices and again, stay safe, alive and out of prison. That's kind of just a breakdown of where we are with those dimensions. And then I'll just give you a brief overview of our provider network. Something else that's different about us is that we have a no public and private part, nonprofits, houses of worship. They do not just hand people a phone number and say, call this person, go on your way. We are right there with them every step of the way with our intensive support and actually teaching them how to access these resources on their own and to, eventually become self-sufficient in the community. This is a little bit about our program vision. It's an 18 to 24 month transformation, which starts with engagement. Again, I want to highlight this is voluntary. Nobody can be court ordered to this program or required to participate as a result of a condition of probation. They have to choose to do this, want to do this. They are assigned, if they're an adult, a case manager. And if they are a youth, the youth themselves gets a youth life coach, and their parent or guardian gets a case manager. But either way, there is holistic support to the entire household. So even if the primary participant is an adult, if they live still with their parents or with a sibling or with a spouse, girlfriend, boyfriend, anybody in the household can receive supportive services through their participation in GVI. We hope that the next step in the process then includes some internalization, where they're doing some life mapping, achieving some goals. Some of the things we haven't been able to do yet because of COVID include transformative travel and community involvement. It is a dream and our mission to be able to actually take groups or individuals into the community and volunteer side by side with them, set up restorative justice opportunities for them, teach them about, appropriate methods of advocacy, through our system and governmental structures, and then use the transformative travel to basically show them what else is out there in the world that they may not have had an opportunity to see thus far in their life. And that culminates obviously at the end with a graduation. We haven't been around long enough yet to have anybody graduate, but we've got some folks making significant progress and well on their way towards graduation. And our hope is then to establish an alumni fellowship where they will want to continue their relationship with us, and then be able to access some leadership opportunities that we can offer them. They can participate in advocacy opportunities with us. They may even be able or interested in serving as peer mentors for some of our younger folks coming on board. But we want this to really be a place where they can have a safe connection to other folks that have experienced what they've experienced and have really made long-term changes in their life.
Okay, so we'll have an opportunity for some questions. But before we get there real quick, we just want to say that last night we performed a call-in at Cornerstone Baptist Church. We had 13 out of 15 individuals that were supposed to show. And I believe at the end of that, we had 9 individuals who want to engage with us after that call-in. So we'll answer any questions if there's anything at this point.
Mr. Chair, we received a question through the Q&A feature, which we don't normally enable for these meetings. The question is from one of our public attendees. They asked, what was the total number of potential clients who were offered the services opportunity?
As of the date in this presentation, which was the end of February 28th, we had outreached 79 individuals, either through the call-in or custom notification process. There are more as of today, obviously, but I don't have an exact number to give you right now, but as of the end of February, it was 79.
I do have a chat question. She come in can you explain the difference in the roles and the duties between the case manager and the life coach?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry. So the case managers, they primarily deal with the adult population, and then the youth life coaches deal with the juvenile side.
So in looking, I believe the number was 50 for adults. So that would be 2 caseloads of 25 per the case managers. So
you want to answer, Chris?
Yeah, we are woefully understaffed right now, and we are well aware of that. Best practices dictate that our staff should have caseloads somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 to 8 people at a time. Because we're new and we grew so rapidly, when I showed you the slide about the national statistics, the fiscal planning for launching this was based on those national statistics. So we did not have additional staff in the budget to ramp up as quickly as we've been able to engage individuals, but we are in current talks with the Department of Health and Social Services, and actually hope to have authorization next week to begin another wave of hiring so that we can ease the pressure on the existing staff and have room to continue to take on new clients as time goes by.
Yeah, because we definitely outpaced the national standard.
Yes. And I guess on that same note, in looking at like with the COVID relief dollars coming in from the federal government into our state, and there being opportunities to, I guess, use some of those dollars to support this work, because a lot of the increase in violence has been linked to COVID. Has that been discussed in your office?
Well, I know Megan Wallace works out of the governor's office, and we've been looking at opportunities to access grant funding if it's made available to us.
Excellent. I will now ask if there are any questions from members of the subcommittee. Mr.
I have questions.
Yes, sir.
Well, maybe they aren't questions, but I am apparently now leading a prevention intervention group within the subcommittee. So that's hardly begun, but that's correct, isn't it, Representative?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. We'll be launching it officially.
Okay, we need some champagne on a ship or something. So I had caught wind of this, and I just think it's fabulous. I mean, it's the group dynamic approach, working with the groups, and so I think the prevention intervention group's task will be to do anything we can to support what you're doing.
Appreciate that.
And then figure out what else to do, with our effort to hopefully get to, maybe I'm too broad. I want like equity in the whole society. And then I think there won't be problems like this if we really have equity. So
that's a start. Yes.
Yes.
We would be happy to come and meet with the subcommittee as well when you have it established, and provide them this same presentation, answer any questions that they might have about what we're doing and what some of our other partner initiatives are doing about gun violence. As you may be aware, there's a program also running through the hospital system, and then there's a community intervention team that works out in the streets directly, trying to interrupt violence when there's concerns about retaliatory behavior.
Yeah, there's many things happening, which is good. I mean, this is probably the most comprehensive, I think, but there's all kinds of things happening. Might be nice to see if we could somehow, if someone, maybe you've already done this, sort of mapped what all the different efforts are that are going on in Delaware. But
I know Megan Wallace in the governor's office is looking at a lot of those things that you're just mentioning.
And we were given, the Delaware Legislative Black Caucus, were given a presentation from Megan maybe 2 weeks ago. So I will try to get that presentation she presented to you, Mr. Crosby.
Okay, thank you. So that's all I wanted to say mostly, is that whether it's a committee meeting or just also on the phone, I'd like to make sure I understand what you're doing, so whatever I'm doing is supportive and then fills in gaps, whatever the gaps are, if there are any. It's a pretty comprehensive approach. So
we appreciate that.
Are there questions from members of the subcommittee?
Hello, this is James Sherrod. I just have a question. I almost had the feeling that it's been asked before in one of our seminars, but to the group, have you asked the question and cataloged the different answers as to why kids or adults are involved in gun violence? What do they think is the reason they became involved? And have you tracked those kind of responses? And what have you found?
We have not tracked it specifically as it relates to that, but a lot of activity in the gun violence, again, is related because of group activity. Why they choose to use the gun, we're not certain, but because of their, like the peer pressure model, they get a little bit more encouragement. They get a little more, what do I want to say, aggressive because of the group activity and trying to make a name for themselves. And again, it's involved around a lot of social media issues, but why they go to the gun, I couldn't answer that right now.
I think it's important to note that, you know, universally, all of the participants we've dealt with so far have a significant history of trauma, which, you know, I believe is a factor in some of this behavior. Obviously, you all know there are, you know, other institutional type things that they have gone through in terms of poverty, discrimination, you know, all of those types of factors that potentially make them feel they are helpless or hopeless in terms of their potential to succeed in life or to become what they might aspire to. We hear often that they don't believe they have a life expectancy beyond the age of 25, you know, which is very, very sad for us to hear, but that's kind of where their mindset is, unfortunately.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I'm not really a question, but I'm wondering to get your feedback on it. When you were describing the call-ins, I know I mentioned a little earlier, maybe right before you got on, in addition, one of our new subgroups will be focused on illegal guns. And I was thinking about that same approach for your call-in methods. I mean, we know these individuals who are currently in possession or have been in possession of illegal guns, to have that same type of call-in approach to let these individuals know that as you mentioned, it will no longer be tolerated type of approach. So I'm wondering what would be your thoughts on that type of maybe a recommendation or approach coming from our subcommittee?
I think if you did that, you're going to be engaging probably the same individuals that have already been engaged, because it's a small percentage of individuals who are involved in the activity. And again, it's identified through their group activity. And they when they did the problem analysis, they did like a 5-year history of the shooting incidents and the homicides. And it came back to the same small group of individuals. So if you did that based on that, just that gun aspect, we're going to be talking to the same individuals.
Okay. Okay, appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any additional questions from members of the subcommittee? Seeing none, I would like to thank you, Chief Cummins, for your presentation as well as your staff and the supports and for your work that you are undertaking on behalf of our state and especially our areas of need. I look forward to the expansion and your growth, having additional support staff to engage in our communities, not just in Wilmington, but Dover and other areas of need throughout our state. As we know, this is a growing concern. Our next agenda item, I'm hoping you could stick with us. We have a video by Mr. Cedric Alexander, Dr. Alexander, and we want to show a video and would love to get your input. A lot of what he mentions are direct related to GVI and that approach to having community-based supports, but also systematic supports through social services and state governments and nonprofits. So if we could play that video, and if you wouldn't mind sticking around joining us for a little discussion afterwards, I would greatly appreciate it.
We'll stick around. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Giving us the opportunity to present. Thank you.
Thank you. If we could begin the video.
Mm-hmm.
We're working on it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And this video was shared through our Law Enforcement Accountability Task Force Chair, Representative Frank Cook, and he and I have been discussing it, and I've shared it with a few of our police chiefs, and happy to share today.
ATI, do you have any tips for us on how to get the audio to work? I'm not really sure what that means. I'm not a tech person.
I do know that when you're sharing audio on FaceTime, you have to, as soon as you hit share screen, there's two little buttons down at the bottom you have to check that say share with everyone, the audio. So if you didn't check those buttons, you won't get audio.
Anymore. So the question becomes, how do we get out?
Okay, I think I'm hearing it now.
Good morning and welcome to Inside Story. I'm Tamala Edwards. As you know, if you watch the news, Philadelphia is in the middle of a crisis of gun violence. Just this week, look at some of the headlines. A 6-year-old injured, his father killed as their car was sprayed with bullets. 2 teens shot as they left a PAL center in a drive-by with police literally on the other side of the door. So the question becomes, how do we get out of this? My guest today is Dr. Cedric Alexander. He knows policing inside out. He's a former officer. He's been a chief there in Georgia and New York. He's worked on these issues on the national level, and he's the former head of the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Well, like this whole city, wondering what needs to happen. As I just laid out there, we're in crisis. Let me give you a few numbers here. We're on track at this point to have 600 murders by the end of the year. Homicides at this point up 30% this year alone. And as you and I have spoken about, that is leading to an attitude of despair, people fearful that this thing has gone so far you can't come back. And that's where I wanted to begin. Is that the truth, or is there a way out of the spiral?
Well, there is a way to recover, but it's not going to be the police department that's going to be able to do it alone. Certainly, they're going to have resources and personnel that are going to be stretched when you have that kind of increase in violent crime, and that's in any community, regardless of where you are. But what's going to be really important here is going to be the community is going to have to take a role in working with and helping police identify and resolve some of these crimes and be eyes and ears for police. Now, I know we probably have heard this before. It's very basic and fundamental, but actually it is a basic and fundamental tool that can be utilized until they can get a grip on a much larger systemic issue that's creating this uptick in violence across your city and many other cities across America.
How do you do that? The relationship here between many communities and the police department is so fractured that when they hear we have a role and we need to help, they want the police help, but they're also, they say, fearful of interactions with the police. What exactly should they be doing, and how do you get around that?
Well, you know, I mean, if we look at police in this country historically, and certainly many of the issues that a large metropolitan areas have had, such as Philadelphia over the years, under a lot of different administrations that really have not been community friendly. And then in more recent years, in the last 20 years or so, 30 years, you certainly have had leadership in your city, as in many cities, that have really worked towards trying to build those relationships, even up until this current moment with your current mayor and chief of police there. So they're working hard to do everything that they can to build and bridge those relationships. But what you're also struggling against is that when police is seen in another part of the country doing something that may be amiss, doing something that causes a great deal of pause and concern, every police department get stigmatized that way, and your agency is no different. It just makes it just that much more difficult for any department to pull itself up and gain the type of trust and legitimacy it needs with its community in order to be able to advance public safety. So that is a challenge, but it has a historical context to it. And as we continue to move forward in these really very unpredictable and challenging and divisive times that we're in, the only way that we're going to get out of this, quite frankly, Tamala, in the short term and the long term, it has to be a collaborative relationship that must be expressed in that community. And that's hard work, and it's going to take a lot of hard work to do it. But it becomes incumbent of every police officer there in Philly and as many other cities. Every time you go to a call for service, we're leaving a calling card on the type of service that we delivered and how people will see us and how they will respond to us. Hopefully each and every time we have to respond to their homes and their communities.
When we spoke a little bit about this yesterday, one of the things that you really impressed upon me, that a lot of this is long-term, not overnight, and that the people need to hold leaders accountable and really press them. This week, the mayor's come out with a new budget, and included in there is some new funding, a lot of it based on the federal stimulus to use that money in the community. So he says he's going to add almost $19 million to anti-violence efforts, a total of $35.5 million in funds. That includes over $2 million for violence prevention, $2 million for jobs program, $1 million to clean up blight and other programs. Is that enough? When you look at those numbers, I say $35 million over the next year. Is that enough? And when we talk about a horizon, are you talking about it takes a year to see a difference, 5 years, 10 years? What are we looking at?
Well, nothing is going to be short term. You're talking about a major city there in Philly. You're talking about a city that has other issues, certainly, that has to be addressed. If you ask the question, is that enough money? The question becomes, how much is ever enough money? But it appears that your mayor is making a very good attempt to try to direct funding into places that are so important to many cities across the country right now. And that is trying to put money into social service issues and places and organizations that can help maybe get in front of some of these issues that we're having that end up being calls for service police. Because what has happened, we have put so much on our social service entities, police, criminal justice, court systems, child and family services. Everyone is overwhelmed because what we have is a broken ecosystem in many of our cities where everything is out of balance. There's a lack of jobs, lack of opportunities, there's poor education, there's homelessness, and mental health certainly being a very big one. So we really have to think about how we get our arms around this. How do we take funding, is what it appears your mayor here is trying to do, take funding to direct in some of these areas to hopefully get out in front of some of these demands that our communities have great need for. And hopefully over time that will help reduce the likelihood of crime in our communities, but that is long term.
When you say long term, do you mean, what is a timeline? People will say, is he telling me 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? What should let me set my expectations?
It could be, well, I think that's going to be dependent upon how they utilize these funds. But when I say it's not going to be it's going to be long term. It could be a year, 2 years, 3 years. It could be longer. But the whole idea here,
well, I want to ask you,
you're moving in that direction. But at the same time, we got to think, what do we do short term while that is taking place?
I wanted to ask you about some of the other debates going on in the city. The current district attorney is a former criminal defense attorney, and he's gotten a lot of flack with people saying that he has been too lenient when it comes to how people are treated when they're caught with a gun. There's a few facts. Since he's taken office, gun arrests have tripled, but convictions have dropped almost 15%. The number of gun or violent cases dismissed or withdrawn is up 85% in his tenure. And there are a lot of people who say the feeling out there is that there are no consequences. He'll say police aren't doing the job. They're getting the guns, but they're not making the case. And he's not going to make the case if there's enough evidence. All of this is going on. And then there are people who say, you know what? Just let police go back to being hard-nosed and we'll get out of all of this. Is that the right attitude? And looking at all of this, how should we assess him and what should happen with police?
No, we can't take on this notion police must go back to being hard-nosed. That'll take you back 40 or 50 years to the Rizzo administration. I don't think that's what anybody in that city wants. I think what people are saying is that we want law enforcement to be able to go out here and do their job, but they still got to do it constitutionally. That's the most important thing here. It's got to be done right. It's got to be done constitutionally. And yes, if you have bad people and you have violent people in your communities, they have to be arrested. They have to be taken off the street, and they have to be kept off the street. Because if they're arrested and turned right back in those communities, then the same thing is going to happen. We see that over and over and over. And your local police is very right about that, because they go out, they catch these hard felons, they bring them to the Justice Center, and sometimes, not all times, but sometimes they can be released back into the communities. So yeah, there needs to be certainly a much more conservative, thoughtful approach around how we take these violent criminals off the street. But at the same time, anything that we're going to do around policing, it has to be done constitutionally. And you can do that without using strong terms of going back to the good old days, because that's not going to resonate and that's going to work against you in the opposite direction. So it's finding that balance here, supporting your police that go out and do the constitutional work they need to do. Then you need to have a court system. When these folks are brought there for violent crimes or repeated violations, there has to be a place for them to go to get them off the street so that community can begin to heal. But part of that larger ecosystem here again is that we have to build in our communities jobs and opportunities and better schools for folks so that those communities can begin to prosper and move from where they are, because a lot of communities are suffering. So if everyone can find a way in any of our cities across the country, we got to find a way to get on the same page and understand that this is a systemic issue. And police is not going to resolve it by itself, but they're a key component. You said to me they can't be an
island out there by themselves doing it. But I want to go back to you on the issue of the district attorney. Even if the perception is that people are not being charged or gone after in the same way as they've been under different district attorneys, does that undermine the effort to pull back on this gun violence?
Well, it certainly could. It certainly could. And here again, this is why the conversations that we're having here right now, Tamara, is the conversations that are going to have to take place with elected officials and with those that are in charge of public safety, whether it's the DA's office, whether it's the public defender's office, the judges, the mayor, the chief of police, all of those. And let's not forget parole and probation and people who live in communities, because what has to be addressed in the way that you're going to find answers to this is not going to be left up to some sole source. It's going to have to be collective conversation and people putting politics and egos aside to come up with something that's going to be beneficial to the entire community overall. And if you don't do that, then we're going to be back here having this same conversation, not with me, but with someone. So it's a heavy lift, but it's a lighter lift if all of those entities that I just named are there together working to try to move their city forward in this very troubling and challenging time. And that is not Pollyanna, what I'm talking. This is real, because you have a violent problem there, like many cities across this country is having. The statistics and the data is bearing it out. And we're throwing money at these resources. We're throwing money and resources at the issue, but it has to be coordinated and it has to be measured. And that's the only way that you're going to be effective in any community.
One of the issues that's been raised in Philadelphia and other cities is the question of, are police pulling back? Are they saying, with all the scrutiny, the criticism, can't do it this way, can't do it that way, that they're just saying, okay, I'm going to back away? Is that a legitimate issue? And what would you say to some of those officers who might say, you know what, you guys handle it then if everything I do is wrong?
Yeah, I hear that, and I certainly have heard it in many other cities across the country where police officers do sense they do get a feeling of frustration. They go out there, they work hard, they bring bad people in, they turn around, sometimes see these bad people back on the street. They feel they're under a great deal of criticism because not of something they may have done in their department, but maybe something happened in another department on the other side of the country. But here's what I would say to them is this. We knew this job had its challenges when we joined up. We know that. And we also know it's very important for our own safety and for the safety of the people that we serve in this community. In all of our frustration, we still have to keep our head above ourselves and go out and do the very best that we can, because there are people in their communities, your communities, other communities that depend on us to get this job done for them every day. But here's a big piece for people in Philly and anywhere else in this country. It becomes important, even in light of the challenges that we're having across this country with police and community. It is important in your own respective community, right there in Philadelphia, that we find support of our local police. We have good police officers, and we have those who are troubled. They have to be identified. They have to be dealt with accordingly and appropriately. But it becomes dangerous if we allow ourselves to castigate or demonize a whole department because of a failure of those who go outside of the law. So you got a great chief there in your city, and you got a mayor who's doing an incredible job. I occasionally follow the news there in Philly, as I do in many other cities. But I would just encourage those police officers there in Philadelphia, keep your head up and just keep getting it done. And
well, to that point, you mentioned our police chief. You've been chief twice. She's been here about a year, and it's been a tough go with the pandemic and everything else. And she's been criticized for police tactics like the use of tear gas on protesters, the lack of reform in a department with historic issues around race and gender. You've been in these shoes. Is it fair to lay a lot of the crime surge and breakdown in the police community relations at her door, or that's not really the fair thing to do here? Do you have a perspective on that?
Well, if you're a chief of police, certainly it's very painful, as I'm quite sure it is for her. She come into that city, bringing all her experience, all her training and everything about her to that job, and into a police department, as you indicated, that has had a long history of issues around race relations and gender issues as well. But in spite of all that, in the short time that she's been there, and being in the middle of a pandemic, we have to step back and say she's really doing a great job. But here again, anytime that you're in those appointed positions, anytime you're ahead of those elected positions, you're going to get rocks thrown at you. People are not going to be satisfied with what you do. But what I would say to Chief Outlaw, as I say to other chiefs and those across the country, keep me moving forward. Keep thinking about how you want to reform. Set your standards and maintain them. Go towards your goal. Seek the support of your community and your leadership, elected leadership. But yes, it is tough. And I've chiefed 2 cities in very critical times. Here in the mid-2000s and recently. And much of what she has experienced, I have experienced as well. And many other chiefs have experienced. But she needs our support. And the community, I hope, will continue to support her because she's doing a very difficult job under a very different a different time.
Different times. Dr.
Position.
Alexander, we're down to the last couple of minutes. You mentioned earlier the Chauvin trial and, of course, what's going on with Daunte Wright when you mentioned the Midwest. Depending on the outcome of that trial, probably within the next week, it will have reverberations. What will it mean to the task of policing if indeed he is not convicted, if indeed he does not face any penalties for what happened to George Floyd? Will that be a moment in time, or will that have a long-standing effect on trying to turn around these relations?
Well, I think it goes without saying, and we never know what a jury is going to do. But if he's found not guilty, I think a lot of people in this country are certainly going to be disappointed and going to be frustrated. They're going to be sad. They're going to be angry. And it's going to reinforce the thought, particularly for communities of color, that there is just no way out of this situation in which many people of color feel that they're in when it comes to these police and community relationships and the trust and legitimacy that has been lost if he's not found guilty. And if he's found guilty, it still is not going to resolve the issues that are still very much long-standing. But at least people will maybe have a sense that things are moving in a direction that is going to, there's going to be penalty for those who are in these sworn positions for the egregious acts that may be carried out. But look, Derek Chauvin is not being tried in a court of public appeal. He's being tried in a judicial system in the state of Minnesota, and those 12 jurors are going to render the decision based on evidence that have been placed in front of them. But we as communities across this country, whatever the verdict may happen to be, we have to be ready to move beyond it and continue to press forward towards these reforms and that are so desperately needed in policing, and not these Band-Aid approaches to reform.
But long-term
But
approaches.
I'm talking about broad reform, and because we really got to change the whole construct around policing in this country and the delivery of public safety.
Well, what I heard from you today is that there's a role for everybody, for the police, for the district attorney, for the communities, for the mayor, and for everybody to put their shoulder to the wheel and recognize we're in for a long haul if we want to get out of this. Dr. Alexander, thank you for your experience and for your perspective, and we hope that it's giving some people out there some ideas on how we can pull together and get out of this. And thank you to you for joining us here on Inside Story. I'm Tamala Edwards. We'll see you back here next week.
Thank you. And I've watched that, maybe 8 or 9 times and had various discussions from everyone.
A teenager is recovering after police say he was stabbed while trying to rob people in South Philadelphia. This happened on a playground at 25th Street in Snyder.
Thank you. Has had various discussions with individuals from police chiefs. As I mentioned, Representative Frank Cook and I have discussed it and have shared it. So I was looking very forward to today and sharing it with the committee. I felt every time I listen to it, I get a greater insight as to some of the challenges that not only our subcommittee, but his law enforcement accountability task force are challenged with. And a lot of the work in that community, building that relationship, that rapport, I really feel, to me, it connects to GVI. I feel that a lot of that supports in trying to assist in bridging that gap between law enforcement and community. I see that as a way of implementing GVI in a way that helps to give individuals that pathway from being involved in the criminal or juvenile justice system to becoming involved in the communities where, as you said, they're safe and alive, and they're not worried about gun violence or the threat of gun violence, but they're just living their lives. So, Chief, I have some comments here from your successor, Chief Tracy in Wilmington, but I would like to first just get your feedback on Dr. Alexander's video and love what you can just provide some just discussion points and how you see it can assist us here in Delaware.
All right, State Rep, thank you. As you're aware, when I was the chief of police in the city of Wilmington, we were heavily engaged in 21st century policing and looking at how we could do things differently through policies and procedures. The way we carry out our engagement with the community and trying to, again, build legitimacy. I was also a part of when Dr. Alexander was the president of Noble. I attended many conferences where he spoke and things that we talked about, and along with Chuck Ramsey, who was a former police chief in Philadelphia. There are issues that need to be, again, addressed around policies. There are issues that need to be addressed around legislation. There are things that are in play that have not been changed in years that allow some of this stuff to continue, because until you change some of those legislative laws and or procedures, it will allow things to continue. We looked at things around use of force. So we adjusted things in terms of de-escalation, but if the law allows an officer or someone to say that they were in fear for their life, and that is a state legislative policy, then, or a law that is on the books, generally the officer is going to be, going to get off on that. So there are root causes and policies, and again, legislation that allow these things to occur. So as much as everyone wants to protest, you talk about the issues that come up, and your voice is being heard, but then what doesn't happen is the policy around it doesn't change. The legislation around it doesn't change. So you get the public opinion about it, and the public opinion weighs heavily, but if you don't change things on the books that impact it, it will continue to be the same. We worked on things around community policing and trying to do things different. Engaging with the community from a standpoint that every police officer was to engage in community policing. But we know that every person is an individual human being. So how you carry out your job with having discretion, that means that you can make a decision based on your best information at the time, or sometimes on your own personal opinion, because you have discretion. So if I want to give you a ticket for running a red light, I can give it to you. If I choose not to give it to you, I don't have to, because that is within my discretion based on the laws. So I think what he said is very important, because again, a lot of that was geared up around 21st century policing and how we were looking to do things different. And you have to continue down that path. And it is nothing that is going to be short term. It will take time, and it has taken time, but you do still need to do things in the short term to address the immediate issues that are occurring. But you also have to do it with the outlook on how is it going to impact long term? What do we need to do long term down the road? So I'll stop it there, and for now, unless you have anything else for me.
No, I really appreciate it, Chief. I think that, those comments, again, when I heard him describing some of the breakdown of our society, some of the areas of need, and he mentioned it from education to jobs and mental health. I see GVI as like helping to convene all of those partners together to provide supports for these individuals who we know, that this small group of individuals who we know are so needy, who really are desperate. And I truly believe in my heart that many of them, no one wants to stand on a corner and feel constant threat for your life. No one wants that, but I know they don't want that. So if they're given that opportunity, a true opportunity to have a different life, I believe many of these individuals will choose a different life, will choose a different path. It's just how do we get that and enable them to change their lives and to sustain it and have a culture that will support it. Because right now, sadly, there's a culture, a negative culture within our community that supports the way of life in which they currently find themselves trapped. So how do we begin to turn those lights back on and create this sense of community again? I think that, to me, is truly how I see GVI helping us to do that and to get these individuals who we know are at high risk for committing crimes as well as being victims of gun violence to have those supports that they need to turn their lives around. Another thing that was mentioned in the video that I struggle with as a legislator in hearing the work of our police officers and hearing Dr. Alexander explain it, where so many individuals are being arrested for guns and then they're not being prosecuted. Some of the comments that I received from our chief, that I'll share some of them, were to that point. He sent me some statistics through this year in January. Wilmington police have made 99 gun arrests in the first quarter. And of those 99, 35 of them had prior gun arrests. One of them had 5 gun arrests. Another one had 4 gun arrests. 6 of them had 3 prior gun arrests. 12 of them had 2 prior gun arrests. And 15 of them had 1 prior gun arrest. 22 of the 99 were on some form of probation or pretrial supervision. Of the 99, collectively, there were 735 felony charges and 1,526 misdemeanor charges. Of the 99, there were 21 who were juvenile, or 21% of them were juveniles. 8 of the 21 juveniles were 8 of them had prior gun arrests. 5 of them had 2 gun arrests. 3 of them had 1 prior gun arrest. And 13 of them were on some type of pretrial supervision. There were a total of felonies for them of 162 and 232 misdemeanors. Following their arrest and arraignment, bail was set. 6 of them were arrested, resulted in release without any bail being set. 13 arrests resulted in unsecured bail and release without any having to post any bail. 25 resulted in unsecured bail, requiring some bail to be posted, and 55 of the arrests resulted in cash-only bail, with many committed to a correctional institution pending further proceedings. That sense of knowing and seeing that challenge, that's where I struggle in trying to get a handle on if our officers are arresting these individuals. Many times they're caught with illegal guns, and then we're right back on the streets. The sense of our community is like that there is no repercussions. There's no consequence for me having this gun. I'm right back out on the street. How do we begin to turn that tide and have that conversation? Dr. Alexander called it a collective conversation. I think it's not just law enforcement, but the community, it's legislators, it's our judges and judicial branch, it's our executive branch, all having this conversation geared about trying to change this culture. How do we collectively work together to turn those lights on, to remove that darkness from our community? Because as long as that's there, and those individuals feel that they have that cover, nothing truly changes.
And I think you're right, and the chief makes a great point in the statistics that he's provided. So what you have to look at in that is the laws that sometimes that are written, they impact the broader community. So when a penalty comes up, you're looking at a broad brush and impacting everyone. But if you see that there is a small percentage of individuals that are causing the violence, then you deal with that small percentage of individuals who need to suffer consequences based on their actions. And it can't be something that, if a person who generally doesn't engage in that's not their lifestyle, but they get caught up, they get the same type of sentencing, that's a problem. So then you focus on the individuals that are the issue, and you focus it in that area to be more specific and pinpoint, not make it a broad, that it goes broad across the board. So you have to look at those individuals that are impacting either the violence at that time or the individuals who are constantly getting back out to do the same thing over and over when the numbers show that you have the right people.
Thank you. I will open up for comments on the video from members of the subcommittee.
Representative, this is Alex from DOJ. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hey, thanks. Sorry for the lack of video. I'm on my phone and I lose everybody when I turn the video on. My only comment on the bail issue is I know you, Representative, and I think Chief Cummings are well aware of our frustrations
Yes.
on bail over the course of the last couple of years. Is that I think this morning,
Yes.
if it hasn't happened already, I know that there is a new bail bill that is going to be introduced by several members of the House and Senate. That certainly our read on it is that it will help in these, as Bobby says, the sort of exceptional circumstances, the small number of people, and hopefully will reduce our frustration. So one of the prior speakers was talking about the need for legislative action. I know Representative Chukwuocha, I don't need to explain that to you or the others on the call, but because the bail issue was raised in particular, and because it's timely, because I think that the bill was filed this morning, I will just note for the group that that's an opportunity for the legislature to make a difference in the next 9 weeks or whatever we have until June 30th. That's all I wanted to say.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ms. Mackler. I mean, that's definitely a key point. I'm proud to be amongst the legislators who are leading that charge and being a co-sponsor, the lead sponsor here in the House on that initiative. I mean, it's definitely important so that individuals who can't post bail, are not locked up, and that individuals who truly need to be off of the streets, that we have that opportunity and that our laws support us saying that. I mean, so these same individuals who we're speaking of, repeated gun offenses, they will not be treated the same as another individual who this is their first time, or they just got involved in something. They will be treated differently based on that. And I think that it's that type of just understanding and looking at the overall situation and what we're trying to do in terms of having laws that address that specific group of individuals who are the perpetrators and victims of these crimes. So I definitely think that's a key point in a strong recommendation and just supporting it. We know it's not just a bill, but it's also a constitutional amendment to change it. So it will be this session and have to be followed by in a successive session in supporting this change. So hopefully we can get enough of our legislators on board. I'm not sure if there are any additional comments from members of the subcommittee.
Hello, this is Jim Sherrod again. As I'm listening, I'm wondering, are we missing something? Much of this policing, I mean, we have not talked about the fact that the racial dynamics in it, that there are more Black people that get arrested and treated badly by police. And how are we going to address that? I support police, but I certainly want them to be able to treat people fairly by race. And it seems to me that that is not the case at this point in time, which adds to some of the things that we're dealing with. And part of that goes back again to what is the basic cause for people to behave the way they behave in relation to guns. And my other issue is, what are we doing toward finding the source of these illegal guns, and what are we doing about it? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sherrod. I mean, absolutely. That point in particular, especially your last point about the illegal guns, as I mentioned, for our subcommittee groups, that's one that I intend to lead, and I have been thankfully joined by a few of our chiefs to just begin to look at it and to understand from a law enforcement perspective how these guns end up in the hands of individuals who shouldn't have them, in the hands of our children, and trying to understand what nationally, what's being done within our region to stop this flow of guns, not only those that are purchased in state, but also out of state. I mean, it's a big issue. I will never forget. I'm sure Captain Cummings probably remembers this, but I remember being on city council and at one of our community meetings, an officer comes in and he's explaining how that afternoon he was driving up East 24th Street. It was a group of teenagers and they're looking at something and they don't even see him. He pulls around a van, whips on the lights, and they drop something and run off. And when he goes to see what it was a loaded AK-47, a loaded AK-47. And I will never forget just hearing that story, realizing that myself as a veteran infantryman who used that weapon and the power and destruction that it causes. I could not even fathom that being in the hands of teenagers, but it's that type of destruction. We recently passed or at least passed through committee the magazine bill, and this very day we passed that magazine bill, limiting the size and capacity. Individuals picked up in my city with a 30-round magazine, 9mm, with one in the chamber. And that type of changes, definitely the illegal guns and keeping these tools of war out of the hands of individuals who shouldn't have them is very important on a priority list for myself. And I'm sure there will be strong recommendations from this subcommittee geared toward that. You mentioned the other thing about just justice and understanding the racial dynamics of policing. I think a lot of our work in understanding our community interventions, working with our community to understand that this role, the impact that to me, it's always been that two-part community. It's community and policing. It's not just the officers, but also the community. And as our community begins to understand its role in its relationship with the police, then we begin to look at our relationship with the officers differently, and the officers will then be forced to look at their relationship with the communities that they police differently. So it's really that twofold in understanding that as we begin to change things, many of the things that Dr. Alexander mentioned, from the broken systems in our community, a lot of the work we're doing regarding education, improving our education system, jobs and mental health, as those things improve, these systematic changes, as they improve, then we will be able to improve the capacity of these individuals, these same individuals who are having these run-ins with law enforcement, the same individuals who are toting and carrying the guns. A lot of it is individuals, they feel, I feel a threat. There's a constant threat on my life, that if I would rather be caught with this gun than without this gun. I've heard that many times from individuals in my community. If I don't have it, then I'm putting myself, my own life in danger. So being able to change that perception, and that's a lot of work, hands-on work in our communities to truly bring about that change. And it's going to take everyone, and not just law enforcement, but our community, faith-based communities, our nonprofits, government entities, our civic associations. I think of in New York when they started changing their gun laws, and a lot of the education and programs that went along with it, all the way down to the elementary schools of how things are changing. And what did that mean for everyone, from the oldest to the youngest? It's those type of changes and systematic approaches toward addressing gun violence that I think we need to just begin. And I'm looking forward to our subcommittee groups to really focus in on these areas that we have of just highlighting the need in certain areas. And I will just quickly ask Chief Cummins, if you would, I mean, based on your experience, speak a little bit about the stolen guns that Mr. Sherrod mentioned.
State Rep?
Yes, sir.
We lost connection there for a little bit, but if I can address 2 points, one related to the equity. And what I would say to that is, when you look at the demographics of any city, as it relates to the demographics within the law enforcement or any job setting, you look at the demographics and you compare the two, and then you will find that there is inequality in both. So until you work on your hiring practices and you bring in people that looks like the demographic of your city, the equality is going to be an issue until you get to that point. One other thing I just wanted to say, as it related back to something earlier, and you were talking about second chance and what GVI does. What we do is we feel that and we're so strong in what we do is because, a lot of people talk about giving individuals a second chance, and they may say it, but they don't carry through with the process of actually making it occur. Where we actually address all the barriers that our clientele face, and then we actually get them through the process of reducing those barriers that will then cause them to be able to move forward. So we're just not guiding people to and directing them to go to a particular service. We make sure it gets done, and we have the follow through and carry through because we have intense case management. I just wanted to bring that part back up, but the equality piece, until we recruit, until we recruit the demographics that impact or look like your city and or whatever job environment it is, there's going to be issue around equality.
Yes. And I know in the city in particular, and I believe Newcastle County, I know there was a strong emphasis and push for minority candidates. I believe our current class graduation is not, if not today, then this week. And for us to just realize that the recruitment and also challenges in getting minority candidates into our recruiting classes, in ways in which really thinking forward and finding new approaches to be able to get individuals to consider being involved in law enforcement in their own communities, in their own cities. That's a challenge. And I mean, it's going to take, again, not just recommendations, but true implementing different strategies and approaches, and having the willingness on behalf of the community. We mentioned that the community police relationship, as that begins to change, that's also changes that perception and willingness of individuals to consider. Are there any other comments from members of the subcommittee? Thank you. Well, I would like to just thank everyone for participating. And as I mentioned earlier, our goal is to begin to have meetings. I will be sending out an email shortly just regarding the different working groups that we're trying to establish. One, again, for the firearms, illegal firearms, one for mental health, one for justice, and one for prevention / intervention. So we would encourage our members to just consider joining the one or two, or if you want to join all of them, whatever ones you really feel passionate and emboldened to support this work as we begin to try to develop our recommendations from this subcommittee to go toward our full body. It's very important that our work not be stymied and delayed, but really it gives us that sense of that collective purpose. And it's so real to me in my own district, in my own family, in my own community. The area in which we are tasked with addressing that community violence and just social justice issues, how we can begin to move forward and make our communities, make our state a safer place for everyone, in the work that truly needs to be done on behalf of all of our citizens, in the work that it truly takes all of us to be involved in approach of so many organizations, so many of our state departments and local city governments to be involved in this conversation, and in order for it to be effective and really have the desired change that we all would like to see. So again, I thank everyone for their participation today. Chief Cummins, I thank you for our GVI and everything you've participated today, and for staying on with us. I will now open and see, I don't know if there are any public comments. If there are public comments, they can be emailed to the African American Task Force at delaware.gov. So please, we encourage our public to send in comments. And as we begin to, there will be meeting announcements as we begin to work toward our recommendations and our subgroups meeting again. So I look forward to continued participation from all of our members. Look forward to having Chief Cummings and GVI as they continue to grow and develop to join us again. But thank you again, sir, for all of your efforts on behalf of all of our communities of need, in particular for the one of the greatest places on earth, I say, and that's the city of Wilmington, Delaware, that birthed me, and I will love until I leave this planet of ours. But it's a great place, and it has challenges, but we are working toward creating a better environment and the opportunities for our children. And thank you and GVI staff for the work that you are doing on that, to that regard. I would like to just close the meeting by thanking all of our members for their participation. And with that, we didn't have our quorum, so I would just close the meeting. And again, thank you for your participation.
Thank you.